Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Medical Teaching Podcast for both teachers and learners. Today, I'm going to be talking about trying to get to know your learners. That's in my opinion, one of the most important pieces of being an effective teacher is knowing your learner, knowing your audience, if you would. And so that's going to take a few things. It's going to take asking them questions to get to actually know them, and then also taking the time and effort to actually listen to them and how they respond and what they respond. So a lot of times the tools that I use to try and discern if they are more of an intuitor type learner or a sensor type learner is I'll ask them, tell me about yourself. It's a very broad question. It's a very commonly asked question. You might say, well, that's what's the point in asking this? They've been asked this on, their medical school interviews and their residency interviews, and so why should I ask it? Asking them such a broad question, tell me about yourself, can give you some clues. It gives you some clues as to whether they tend to be more of a intuitor type or more of a sensor type learner. So let's talk about these just for a moment. The difference between these two types of learners is that the sensor type tends to be more concrete. They tend to see and experience the world through their five senses, and they tend to understand things in a more concrete way. They tend to appreciate analogies more. They like structure. They like systems. They tend to do better if they know all of the parameters and all of the steps involved from A to Z. They tend to be very logical and concrete in their steps and they know exactly how to get from A to Z with those steps. So that's the sensor type. And then there's the intuitor type, which the intuitors tend to see the big picture. They tend to see the themes. They tend to see how things fit together. They tend to be able to look at the overall picture, and they tend to focus on that. That tends to be kind of how they understand things. They tend to understand concepts, principles. They're able to take the principles and then apply it broadly to different things. They're more of a top-down, if you would, whereas the sensor type in general tends to be from bottom up. So they take the individual steps, and then from that they discern what is their overall goal, if you will. So the intuitors tend to be more comfortable with you telling them kind of the concept or the theory or the principle that they need to that they're going for, and then let them kind of figure out their own way or intuit their own way to get to that goal or that end point, if you will. And so these two types of learners, it's valuable to know what type you're dealing with, because if you give analogies, concrete analogies to the intuitor type, they're not going to necessarily appreciate it as much. They may feel it is unnecessary. They might even feel like it may muddy the waters or confuse things a little bit more. Whereas if you tell the broad principle only and the big picture only to the sensor types, then they're going to be a little bit bewildered, because they're going to say, okay, well, I understand that that's where we're trying to get in the big picture, but what actual steps do I need to take to get to that point? And so it's useful to know what your learner is going to be more comfortable with, but then it also is useful to help know how to push your learners, right? So the big picture types may need to be pushed to think about, okay, well, so now you have the big picture, now you know where you're trying to get to, and you can intuit kind of how to get there, but what are the step-by-step steps that you need to take to get from A to Z? And helping them think about what are the actionable steps you need to take. And then, of course, for the sensors, then the way to push them will be to say, okay, great. So now, this is the system. This is, the A to Z, but, do you have a clear understanding as to what is the overarching purpose or overarching goals that you're working toward as you are as you're doing these tasks? Do you understand what your overarching goals are? You need to think about that. And so helping your different types of learners be able to grow in the ways that they need to grow. So so again, you might say, well, okay, so how do we figure out what type they are? So like I said, one question you can ask as a tool, as a an evaluating tool, is to say, tell me about yourself. It's a very broad question. Your sensor learners, the concrete types, are going to feel a little less comfortable with this kind of broad question than your intuitor types. Your intuitor types are going to feel a little bit more comfortable kind of sharing the ideas as to what, telling about themselves. So then the next question then you would follow up with would be to say, tell me, what are the 2 or 3 main things or goals that you have that you want to accomplish during this rotation? What are the 2 to 3 main skills that you want to gain? Or what are the 2 or 3 main objectives that you have for this rotation? So, and again, it's so important at this point of time to really listen, right? Because they're going to tell you something, and then their answer is going to give you a clue as to whether they're more big picture or if they're more sensor type, concrete. So if they give you a big picture theme, I want to be a more compassionate physician, or I want to be more competent physician, I want to be more confident physician, I want to be better at medical decision making, I want to be better. These are all big ideas, right? These are big things. These are principles. And so if you combine how they answered, tell me about yourself, and then you combine it with what are your goals, and if they answer kind of who they are in kind of theoretical terms and principles and ideas, and then they answer the goals in, again, principles, ideas, then that gives you a clue that they might be an intuitor type. So then, of course, then you would want to go down the road for them again in not giving them concrete analogies when you're explaining something to them, but explaining the concept and explaining the theory, or going over the theory with them if they already know about it, and then setting them in the direction that you want them to go and telling them the endpoint they need to achieve, and then letting them go through it. And if they don't have a system, then if they're not able to intuit a system, then great. Then you know that that's something that you can help them with. And that might be a weakness for intuitors sometimes, is knowing what system that they should use to accomplish the goals that they have. If they can't intuit it, then that would be a great thing that you can do to help them along, is to help them develop a system, a step-by-step system. If, on the other hand, the learner, in response to what are your goals, or what objectives do you have, and then they give you, well, I want to be able to read EKGs properly, and I want to be able to run a vent correctly, and I want to be able to interpret acid-base problems correctly and confidently. These are very specific things, right? So then these are not ideas, or these are not broad concepts. These are more specific skills. And so that kind of could give you a clue that these might be a more concrete type. And so then these are the types that you would want to give very clear, actionable steps, measurable steps, and give them systems if they don't have a system already, which most likely they do. But if they don't, then they will greatly appreciate a system where you lay out step by step and tell them exactly, okay, step 1, you do this. Step 2, you do this. Step 3, you do this. And it's very important to go in a very logical fashion and very stepwise fashion, especially for these concrete types, because these concrete types, it would not be good for you to make leaps without having everything be clearly connected from one step to the next. And like I said, then after that, then the important thing will be to push them and say, okay, so you want to learn vents and acid-base problems and pressors. So what is the overarching goal that you have? What is the overall objective that you have? And in that case, oh, they want to be better at managing critical care patients. Okay, good, great. And then you can help them focus and understand what their overarching goals and purposes are. So I hope this is helpful, just, thinking about the two different kinds of learners. And I hope that you're able to find even just these two simple questions. I hope you can find it helpful. It will take some practice in listening to your learners and kind of being able to figure out what kind of learner they are, and then also figuring out what type of teacher and learner you are, and then trying to help your learner maximize their learning experience by how you communicate with them, and then also with the things that you push them with. I hope this is helpful. Give me some thoughts and comments and feedback, and I'll talk to you in the next session.